Okay, so welcome everyone, and my name is Eloisa Ramos, and we are here to study the Course in Miracles, the text, and I'm here with my daughter Sonia, and let's see, where is Teresa? She was here a minute ago.
I'm
Okay.
still here.
Oh, you are? We just can't. Oh, I see. It's switching. Let me see. I'm the one that can't see you. Okay, that's better. Okay, and today we are working on chapter 2, section 5. So chapter 2, the separation and the atonement. Section 5, the function of the miracle worker. But I wanted to just review a little bit before we actually start on the function of the miracle worker. I wanted to go just quickly back to section 3 and 4 real quick. So let's see, chapter 2. Okay, section 3. So section 3, at the end of section 3, paragraph 5, let's see, we were looking at line 9. Whenever you are afraid, you are deceived, and your mind cannot serve the Holy Spirit. And so that's a real key sentence, because ultimately what we're doing when we study A Course in Miracles is we are looking to take guidance from the Holy Spirit rather than from our ego thought system. And it says right here that if we are afraid, we are going to be deceived, which means that we're going to be choosing the ego thought system. We're not going to be able to tell the difference. And so our mind will not be able to be guided and serve the Holy Spirit. Okay, and then in the next section, let's see, which is still chapter 2, and it's section 4, healing as release from fear. So in paragraph 1, line 7, all healing is essentially the release from fear. Okay, so if we're holding fear, we're not in our right mind. We are identified and taking guidance from the ego thought system, which is a thought system of fear, not love. And so the healing of the mind is essentially the release from fear. So we are releasing fear so that we're not taking guidance from the ego thought system, but we open the mind to receive guidance from the Holy Spirit, which is the thought system of love. Okay. And so, and so this section had a lot about level confusion. So if we look at paragraph 2, line 2, sickness or not right-mindedness is the result of level confusion. So if we are not in our right mind, it's because we are confusing levels. And what we mean by levels is the level of causation. Okay, so the level of causation can be reversed. So we can believe whatever we want. And because we can believe whatever we want, we can believe what is not true. And that's why we get confused, because we think it's true. And we've been thinking that for so long that we don't even question it. We just assume it's true. Okay, and so that's the error that we're trying to undo. It's because the ego thought system is a thought system that hides the truth that only the mind is causal. And because it hides that, we look for healing where the healing cannot be found, because we're not going to the root of the problem, which is the mind. And that's where we need to go to correct the error. So let's see. Yeah, so in paragraph 2, line 3, we have referred to miracles as the means of correcting level confusion, for all mistakes must be corrected at the level on which they occur. Only the mind is capable of error. The body can act wrongly only when it is responding to misthought. Okay. And for the most part, we believe that we've believed all along that that the body, that we are a body, and that as a body, we do things wrong. We act wrongly. So for example, if I bend down and I hurt my back, my thoughts go to, oh my goodness, what did I do wrong? Okay. How did I hurt my back? I don't know how I hurt my back. So I start going to the past to see what I did wrong. And what this is saying here is that I'm not going to find the answer taking that route, because the body cannot act wrongly. The error is in the mind. So because number 6 says the body cannot create, and the belief that it can, a fundamental error, produces all physical symptoms. And physical illness represents a belief in magic. And magic is a belief that the body can create. So it keeps us stuck believing that the cause and therefore the solution is at the physical level, which is where most of modern medicine is. And that's why we take a physical agent like a pill to solve a physical problem that we think is coming from the body, like pain. Okay, and then the next line, the whole distortion that made magic rests on the belief that there is a creative ability in matter which the mind cannot control. Yeah. So if I believe that what I did with the body is making the pain in my back, then how is my mind going to control that if my mind is not the one that made it? And then I don't know how I made it. I can guess, but then I'm just making things up. So then I try to correct my behavior to see if I can, fix somehow magically what I did wrong and undo it. Okay, so any questions with that? We can go to the section 5 now. No? Okay. All right, let's go back to section 5. So chapter 2. Okay, the function of the miracle worker. Before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it is essential that they fully understand the fear of release. Okay. Otherwise, they may unwittingly foster the belief that release is imprisonment, a belief that is already very prevalent. This misperception arises in turn from the belief that harm can be limited to the body. That is because of the underlying fear that the mind can hurt itself. None of these errors is meaningful because the miscreations of the mind do not really exist. This recognition is a far better protective device than any form of level confusion because it introduces correction at the level of error. It is essential to remember that only the mind can create, and that correction belongs at the thought level. To amplify an earlier statement, spirit is already perfect and therefore does not require correction. The body does not exist except as a learning device for the mind. This learning device is not subject to errors of its own because it cannot create. It is obvious then that inducing the mind to give up its miscreations is the only application of creative ability that is truly meaningful. Okay. All right, so let's go back to sentence 1. Before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in the world, it is essential that they fully understand the fear of release. Otherwise, they may unwittingly foster the belief that release is imprisonment, a belief that is already very prevalent. Okay, so let's look at the fear of release. So what we said earlier was that all healing is essentially the release from fear. So the fear of release is actually a fear of healing. Okay, and we had talked about how sometimes people when we are sick, we are giving value, some kind of value to ideas that are not true, and that's why we believe them. And so to release that belief and that value can feel like there's going to be a loss. If we're identified with these ideas and these beliefs, okay, and they're fear-based, to heal that and release the fear can be interpreted sometimes as fearful because let's see, because we are believing that there's a benefit to being sick. So it would be a loss of that benefit. Okay, and so we have to understand, that sickness, there's a purpose for sickness. And if the person that's sick, if the mind that's sick is holding on to the sickness because they see some kind of value, now, most of the time it's unconscious. So they may not even be aware of what the benefit is for them. But if they're not aware of it, then they're hiding it, and it's not something that they're going to want to release. Okay, so they have to be willing to look at what is the benefit for me in being sick or in holding on to this problem. Whatever the problem is, maybe it's in a relationship, maybe it's with scarcity, um, because otherwise, let's see, number 2 says they may unwittingly foster the belief that release is imprisonment, a belief that is already very prevalent. So imprisonment would mean that we have lost our what we want, that we are not exercising our free will. So if we so it can feel like we're being forced to heal, which we can't. Nobody can be forced to heal. And so you can't force someone to change their beliefs and their values. They have to be able to see that it's in their best interest to do it. And until they see that, the miracle worker cannot force anything on anyone, because the healing comes from the person themselves, their own mind. They have to be ready to release it. Otherwise, there will be fear, and that's not going to be healing, because healing is the release of fear. Okay, so this misperception arises in turn from the belief that harm can be limited to the body. So, okay, so let's see. So the belief that harm can be limited to the body has to do with dissociation. So what's the word? So we might say, well, this is what I want. Okay. And okay, it's gonna, maybe it's really, really stressful for the body. Maybe it means that maybe I like playing video games. Okay. And it demands that I sacrifice my rest at night. It means that I have to stay up really late to do it with my friends or something. And my belief is, well, that's okay, because the harm is just going to be in my body. So I'm going to feel tired, but it's just my body that's going to feel tired. Okay. So I'm willing to like sacrifice my body as if my body was separate from me. And it's not separate from me. But if I dissociate, I can make it seem as if it's separate from me, and that somehow, the body's going to suffer, but I'm not going to suffer. Okay, which is a misperception. And so that's because of the underlying fear that the mind can hurt itself. So if we're dissociated, we're going to believe that the ego mind is independent from the body and can do whatever the heck it wants without having to experience their repercussions. So maybe I pick up smoking, okay, and I'm going to do it because I enjoy it, and the heck to whatever consequences come to the body. Okay, and so but in this sense, it's because that the mind can hurt itself. Okay, so the mind cannot hurt. The mind cannot hurt, but we can believe that it can hurt itself. So for example, I can make a mistake when I decide to do something. And then, when I look back on it, I said, I can look back and I said, oh man, that was a really, really bad decision. I really effed myself, you know, by making that decision. So I'm saying, oh, shoot, my decision really hurt myself. So I'm believing that my mind can hurt myself. um, but none of these errors are meaningful because the miscreations of the mind do not really exist. Okay. And they're all miscreations because all these beliefs are based on judgments. So if I look back and I judge that I made a really bad decision, well, that's a judgment that I made. It's not that it was really a bad decision. It's that that's how I'm seeing it because I'm judging it that way. And so I'm miscreating it to mean that I can hurt myself by making bad or wrong decisions. And in that way, I get to believe that that there is no script. The script is not written, that I can really screw up my life here. And then I can blame myself and feel really bad and guilty and judge myself for it. Okay. Okay, but none of these errors are meaningful. Okay, they're all based on subjective personal judgment, that which are the miscreations of the mind, and they do not really exist in truth. And that's why they can be released, because they're forms of self-made illusion or delusion or deception or whatever. So 6, this recognition is a far better protective device than any form of level confusion because it introduces correction at the level of error. Okay, so if I can recognize that these are all my own judgments, and I could have just judged differently. You know, maybe I could have looked at that judgment in the past and said, oh, well, maybe that wasn't a bad decision. Maybe, you know, there's something there for me to learn. Maybe it was supposed to happen that way. Okay, so I can see it differently. And if I can recognize that, then that is a better protective device than going to the belief in magic and trying to correct it uh, by uh, by going to like, oh man, I really screwed up. Now I feel really, really bad. So now I'm going to go take, I don't know, I'm going to go have a milkshake. That always makes me feel good, you know? So, so that would be, you know, going to magic as to help me protect myself from how bad I feel. So, but at least, you know, the recognition that, oh, okay, I could see this differently. That's going to introduce the correction at the level where it occurred, which is in my mind. So it is essential to remember that only the mind can create, and that correction belongs at the thought level. So like I said, that is really, really, really essential for the healing process, for the miracle, to open the mind to the miracle. So to amplify an earlier statement, spirit is already perfect and therefore does not require correction. And because spirit is already perfect, that's the let's see, that's the light that shines in our mind to help us dispel the error, which is an illusion. And you can call that Holy Spirit. Okay. So, and 9, the body does not exist except as a learning device for the mind. So whatever we think the body is doing, okay, it is simply a learning device because the body just takes instructions. So we have to look at what the body is doing and say, okay, well, it's just repeating instructions. So let's look at the instructions, and correct the instructions to learn so that the body does not keep repeating incorrect instructions and doing it, doing things that are incorrect. And what we mean by that is unloving. So we judging and attacking and blaming, those are all habits that we have taught ourselves, and we think there's a benefit to it. That's why we keep doing it, and that's why we give value to it, and that's why we believe that it's somehow helping us or protecting us or something. So the body as a learning device is not subject to errors of its own because it cannot create. It's just, it's like a computer that runs on software. And the programming is the software. That's the ego thought system. But you can change the software. You don't have to go to like the manufactured settings, which came with it, which is the ego thought system. You can install, and it's not even install new software. You can bypass that software and go to what is true and is loving, which is the essential nature of what we are, which is what creative power is. It's love. And so, okay. So it is obvious then that inducing the mind to give up its miscreations is the only application of creative ability that is truly meaningful. Okay, so we are, let's see, we give value to our miscreations. And now miscreations are not made by our true mind, which is creative and given creative power by God, who is the source of all creation. Okay, because creation is loving and only loving and extends and shares. There's no lack in it. There's no differentiation in it because it's not conditional love. It just gives and gives and gives. But miscreation is coming from our ego thought system. That is a thought system of scarcity and specialness. And because we value it, we hold on to it, even if it's not real. We wish it was real and we try to make it real because we believe it. And so the only application of creative ability in this world that is truly meaningful is to help our own, is to help us to see that our miscreations are not really valuable, so that there can be a change in our mind and we give up miscreating. Which means that we are willing to forgive the past, because that's the only thing that needs to be forgiven. And it's all our own past judgments that we have believed to be true that were not true, and that are all fear-based. And that's how we're going to release fear, by being willing to undo, by forgiving what we made that is false in the past, which is the ego thought system. Okay, that was a really long explanation. Any questions? So it's important to pay attention when we study the text when it uses the word creation and miscreation. Because miscreations are coming from the ego thought system, and creative ability is coming from our source, which is loving, unconditionally loving. And that's how you can kind of tell, you know, like if it's a misperception or a miscreation, then it's referring to our wrong mind, to the mind that is dreaming that it is separate from God. Okay. You want to take number 2, Sonia?
Sure. 2. Magic is the mindless or the miscreative use of mind. Physical medications are forms of spells, but if you are afraid to use the mind to heal, you should not attempt to do so. The very fact that you are afraid makes your mind vulnerable to miscreation. You are therefore likely to misunderstand any healing that might occur. And because egocentricity and fear usually occur together, you may be unable to accept the real source of the healing. Under these conditions, it is safer for you to rely temporarily on physical healing devices because you cannot misperceive them as your own creations. As long as your sense of vulnerability persists, you should not attempt to perform miracles.
Okay, so the miracle worker is, let's see, has to be free of fear, because otherwise, see number 3, the very fact that you are afraid makes your mind vulnerable to miscreation. Because miscreation comes from the ego thought system, which is based on fear. And that is the source of sickness. That's not the source of healing. So we want to be in a right mind without fear. And without fear means that we're not going to believe we are vulnerable, because it's fear that brings up the idea of vulnerability. Because there's a distrust there, uncertainty, doubt that shows up if, you know, about what we are in truth. And so the miracle worker has to be miracle minded and free of uncertainty of the truth of what we are as perfect creations of a source that is perfect love. And so magic is the mindless or the miscreative use of mind, because remember, we're reversing the cause and the effects. So we're giving matter, in this case, physical medications. We're giving them power, and it uses the word spells here. It's almost like what's the word? We hypnotize ourselves. We put a spell on ourselves. It's a placebo effect, you know, to believe that the cause of the healing comes from the physical medication. But it's okay if we are afraid to use the mind to heal. So it's okay to take the medication because we're believing that it can help us, can heal us. And so the thing that we want to be, let's see, we want to look at when we are looking to heal is that we're not afraid. So if I'm going to take the medication, I need to be free of fear. Okay, because if I'm taking the physical medication and I'm afraid of the side effects, well, then I'm 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 sabotaging my own belief that it can heal me. Okay. So the very fact that I would be afraid would make my mind vulnerable to miscreation, which is not going to help me heal because I'm just miscreating again. So
So it's more about doubt versus trust, right?
yes, but it's also about looking at the fear. So in trust, there is no fear.
Right.
Yeah. And so what it's saying is that, okay, magic is the mindless or the miscreative use of mind. Okay, but it's not saying don't do it. It's not judging it. It's not saying, oh, it's bad. It's just saying, look, your mind is the cause. Okay. And if you're going to give power to the physical medication to help you heal, that's fine. Okay. But help yourself by not, what's the word, by not turning that belief and giving it another layer of conflict by bringing fear into it of the side effects. Okay. Because if we're afraid to use the mind to heal and we go to physical medication to heal, but we're afraid of the side effects, then where are we going to go? There's fear there too. Where are we going to go to heal? We've kind of got ourselves stuck, sick, because we have not released fear. We're holding on to fear. So that's all it's saying. Because the very fact that you're afraid makes your mind vulnerable to miscreation, and sickness is a miscreation because we're holding on to fear and it keeps us stuck in the ego thought system. And so let's see. So you are therefore likely to misunderstand any healing that might occur. And because egocentricity and fear usually go together, you may be unable to accept the real source of the healing. Yes, so the ego will want to take credit for healing, okay? Egocentricity. So if we are afraid of healing, and our mind will be vulnerable to miscreation, and therefore any healing that does happen can be misunderstood and believed, and you may be unable to accept that the real source of that healing comes from, see how the source is a capital S? So that mind will be unable to understand that all source of healing comes from God. Okay. If we believe that it comes from magic, that's because we are unable to accept the real source of healing. Because the ego wants to take credit for it. It wants to say, look, here's a magic formula of herbs and whatever, the latest medical breakthrough. Okay. And this is going to heal you. And so, we have a vaccine that's for the, COVID virus that's 90% effective or better. Oh, okay. So we want to believe that we are such incredible healers, you know, the biochemists and the doctors who came up with this formula. Okay, because if we're not careful, the ego mind will want to take credit for the healing that happened. And all healing, okay, comes from the mind, even if it comes through an intermediary that is a physical form, because it's still the power of the mind. But we're going to find it unacceptable to believe that the real source is God, is love. So under these conditions, it is safer for you to rely temporarily on physical healing devices because you cannot misperceive them as your own creations. Yeah, so I mean, I can't take credit for how well the vaccine is working, you know, because I wasn't the biochemist or the doctor that made it. I was, at least I can't deceive myself that way. But if I have a healing, let's see, and it so happened, well, I'll give you an example. Let me see. You know, there's a lot of like household remedies that people come up with. And so sometimes, you know, they'll say, oh, well, I can't sleep at night. Oh, well, you know, here's what works for me. Okay, I take a little bit of warm milk and I put some honey in it and I drink that right before bedtime. And it just takes care of the insomnia. Okay. And so I am taking credit. I am believing that I have come up with my own formula for healing my insomnia. And now I want you to do it. Okay, because I really believe that that the source of my own healing is my own formula that I made up. So yeah, we have to be very careful because the ego is very, very easy. I mean, is very what's the word? It wants to take credit for miracles. And I've experienced that. I can't remember exactly the how, but I do recall saying, "Oh, I see. Here's my ego trying to take credit for the problem." They're just like, "Oh, it's not there anymore." You know, and the ego like wants to just come right in and say, "Oh yeah, I did that for you." You know, praise me. So anyway, let's see. Okay, any questions with paragraph 2? Okay, Teresa, go ahead with 3 there.
I have already said that miracles are expressions of miracle-mindedness, and miracle-mindedness means right-mindedness. The right-minded neither exalt nor depreciate the mind of the miracle worker or the miracle receiver. However, as a correction, the miracle need not await the right-mindedness of the receiver. In fact, its purpose is to restore him to his right mind. It is essential, however, that the miracle worker be in his right mind, however briefly, or he will be unable to reestablish right-mindedness in someone else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's fairly clear. Is that true? Yeah, because we cannot give what we don't have. So the right-mindedness, you can think of it almost as like a tuning fork. As in terms of vibrations, when we are in our right mind, we are in a place of vibrating or resonating to truth. And truth is healing because truth is without fear and without conflict. And when the miracle worker, miracle, let's see, however briefly. So, so it doesn't mean that the miracle worker has to be in his right mind all the time, but even just briefly, to be able to help the person that is not in their right mind as the receiver. The let's see. Because we are always teaching what we believe, consciously and unconsciously, we are always sharing our right-mindedness, okay? Or we are, what's the word? Yeah, the wrong mind cannot be shared, but if we're in our wrong mind, we're not going to be able to help anyone out of their wrong mind, because we're going to be right there in the dream with them. And so the miracle worker needs to be in his right mind. To be, in fact, its purpose is to restore him to his right mind, of the receiver, that is. So we cannot give what we don't have. Okay. So number 4, the healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering his understanding. You are perfectly safe as long as you are completely unconcerned about your readiness, but maintain a consistent trust in mine. If your miracle working inclinations are not functioning properly, it is always because fear has intruded on your right-mindedness and has turned it upside down. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of the refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. If you do accept it, you are in a position to recognize that those who need healing are simply those who have not realized that right-mindedness is healing. Okay. Okay, so we cannot judge our own readiness for offering and working miracles. That's going to be up to the Holy Spirit. If we try to judge that ourselves, we are not going to be in our right mind, because we're not taking guidance from the Holy Spirit. We're just judging, taking the position of judge and authority, as if we were God, to know that. So, okay, so as long as we are perfectly unconcerned about our readiness, but maintain a consistent trust in mine, in the guidance and help that the Holy Spirit is always there with us, to guide us, so that we don't have to, believe that we are prepared and even know or have quote unquote confidence about what we're doing here. We just have to come in with an open mind, trusting that God's will is for the healing of our mind, and that we have the Holy Spirit to help us. And so if our miracle working inclinations are not functioning properly, it is because fear has intruded in our right-mindedness and has turned it upside down. So we are not in our right-mindedness anymore. And if that is so, it's because we have refused to accept the atonement for ourselves. And what that means is that we are believing we are separate in some way. We are perceiving differences in some way. We are believing that we are special or not special in some way. So we're not recognizing the true nature of creation as one with God and with one another, without separation, without inequality, without, true differences. But if we do accept the atonement for ourselves and we recognize that there is no separation, that we're all just one creation, the same, then we are in a position to recognize that those that need healing are simply those that have not realized that it is in their best interest to be in their right mind, because that is healing, and therefore have been choosing the wrong mind as the ego thought system. But if we recognize that the thought system of God is what is truly valuable, and that the ego thought system has no value for us, then we're in a position to see that, recognize that for the receiver of the miracle, who has not realized that to be right-minded is to be healed. Because we're not identified and not under the influence of the ego thought system, which is fear-based, and therefore the mind is sick. So it's all about being able to shift out of the wrong, out of the not right-mindedness, which is called the wrong mind, which is the ego thought system, which we bring with us because it's all of the past beliefs and grievances and all the unforgiveness that has not healed, that we have not forgiven. And because we're still giving value to it, we stay stuck in that thought system. Okay. Okay, number 5, paragraph 5. Sonia?
The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. This means you recognize that mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. Once you accept this, your mind can only heal. By denying your mind any destructive potential and reinstating its purely constructive powers, you place yourself in a position to undo the level confusion of others. The message you then give to them is the truth that their minds are similarly constructive and their miscreations cannot hurt them. By affirming this, you release the mind from over-evaluating its own learning device and restore the mind to its true position as the learner.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the first sentence there is in bold. So it's very important. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. Okay, and that entails the recognition that the mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. And do you remember what the atonement is?
The correction of the belief in separation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the atonement says that the separation never happened. And so when we recognize that the separation never happened, we recognize that we are still one with God and we are still as God created us. And that is our right mind. That is the healed mind. Because it is a release of the belief in the ego thought system, which is a belief in separation. And that belief in separation translates to perceiving separation in the world. So when we're in the ego thought system, we perceive differences. Our eyes see differences. Our eyes see inequality. Our eyes see we see that we seem to see, it's all seeming to see bodies as ourself, separate entities. So the belief in separation translates to a perception of separation in the world that seems to be external from that, from our mind. So even that is a perception of separation because it's a projection. And so to accept the atonement means to let go of all of that. And so we're not actually seeing with our eyes anymore. We're seeing with Christ vision that recognizes that, yeah, there's sure, your eyes can still distinguish that, you're wearing red today and I'm wearing blue, okay? Or, I mean, it can still distinguish physical objects from physical objects and that kind of thing, but it does not make those differences real. Okay, so the fact that, I have brown skin and you have white skin, it doesn't make that difference real. We're both created by God. So, and I don't go into, oh yes, life is there's a hierarchy of life, and humans are on the top, and bugs and cockroaches are on the bottom. Life is life. So it undoes a lot of the judgments. So basically, to accept the atonement is to see no purpose for judging. So it's non-judgment, because there's no point in judgment. All of creation is the same. So once we accept this, we are accepting that we are all one creation as Christ mind, and from that comes Christ vision. And therefore, any miscreation is not real and has no power. So number 4, by denying your mind any destructive potential, which is miscreation, and reinstating its purely constructive powers, you place yourself in a position to undo the level confusion of others. Because level confusion implies fear, and it implies that there is destructive power, because it's fear-based. It's miscreative. But miscreations are an illusion. Miscreations are of the ego thought system, which is not true. The atonement establishes that the ego never occurred. And because it's not a real cause, it cannot have real effects. And coming from that place, then the mind is in a position to help correct the misperceptions of the level confusion of others. And so number 5, the message you then give to them is the truth, that their minds are similarly constructive and their miscreations cannot hurt them. Because we're giving belief to what is not true, and that is the only, and that's the experience that 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 seems to give them real effects, but they're not real effects. It's just that we believe that they are real cause, and they're not real cause. So the atonement makes it very clear that the ego thought system is not causal because it never happened. It's an illusion. It's a dream, and therefore, how can dream figures, what happens in a dream, have real effects? So number 6, by affirming this, you release the mind from over-evaluating its own learning device. The learning device is the body. Because if we make the body causal, we are going to definitely overvalue it, and we're going to put it up on a pedestal, and we're going to give it a lot of attention, and, definitely look up to it. And it's just a learning device. And therefore, we will restore the mind to its true position as the learner. And that's basically the healing of the mind, is the mind recognizing its true position and learning the lessons that it came here to learn, which in the process of that is the healing of the mind. As we learn our lessons, we are allowing the Holy Spirit to correct and to undo the error, which is the ego thought system, that is the sickness and is the illusion. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Okay, is it your turn, Teresa? Number 6, okay.
It should be emphasized again that the body does not learn any more than it creates. As a learning device, it merely follows the learner. But if it is falsely endowed with self-initiative, it becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning it should facilitate. Only the mind is capable of illumination. Spirit is already illuminated, and the body in itself is too dense. The mind, however, can bring its illumination to the body by recognizing that it is not the learner and is therefore unamenable to learning. The body is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind that has learned to look beyond it toward the light.
Okay. Okay, so it should be emphasized again, the body does not learn any more than it creates. It's just an instrument for learning. And therefore, it's the mind that learns. And so the body merely follows the mind, which is the learner. If we give it self-initiative, which we often do, then it becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning it should help facilitate. Okay. So a lot of the times we will give the body sort of, what's the word? We just let it run on autopilot. And then it's almost as if we have a back seat and the body just is the driver. So it's almost as if we don't control, we don't have any control. We don't have any say over what we do. We just do it. And then afterwards we're like, what the heck did I do? And it's like, oh my goodness. So, and that specifically, you can really see that with addictions and with habits. It's as if the mind has a mind of its own. And also with a lot of what we consider to be like instincts, like or well-established patterns, or rituals or things like that, that they're kind of like drivers that just get activated, and we're not even aware what's activating them, but then they just take off and we're just like tagging along, as a mind. And so that will be a serious obstruction to the very learning it should facilitate. Because we're not, because the mind is not going to be in a position to recognize that it is the learner, because we're making the body the one in charge. So how can it even learn anything if the body's in charge? And so only the mind is capable of illumination, which is receiving insight, which is being in spirit, being inspired by the thought system of God, which is unconditional love and the light of truth. So that's the word illuminated. It means it's lit up with the Holy Spirit, the voice for God. And so the spirit is already illuminated, because that's what the spirit is. It's a communication link to truth. And the body itself is too dense. But the mind can bring its illuminations to the body by recognizing that it is not the learner, and is therefore unamenable to learning. And so we're not trying to, what's the word? We allow the body to take its place as the instrument for learning. And the body is easily brought into this alignment with a mind that has learned to look beyond it towards the light. And that's really Christ's vision, to look beyond the body and towards the light within, which is what we are, is to see beyond the appearances of separation and see that each person is really part of that same light of love and truth. So, yeah. Okay. Okay, 7. Corrective learning always begins with the awakening of spirit and the turning away from the belief in physical sight. This often entails fear because you are afraid of what your spiritual sight will show you. I said before that the Holy Spirit cannot see error and is capable only of looking beyond it to the defense of atonement. There is no doubt that this may produce discomfort, yet the discomfort is not the final outcome of the perception. When the Holy Spirit is permitted to look upon the defilement of the altar, he also looks immediately towards the atonement. Nothing he perceives can induce fear. Everything that results from spiritual awareness is merely channelized towards correction. Discomfort is aroused only to bring the need for correction into awareness. Okay, so this kind of summarizes the process of healing here, because corrective learning is healing. It always begins with the awakening of spirit and the turning away from the belief in physical sight. So you can think of that in terms of turning inward rather than having our attention always on what we see with our physical eyes in the world. It's a recognition that the answers are not out here in the world that we see, because that's just the projection, the effect. So it's a turning inward, and that's a turning away from the belief in physical sight. And this often entails fear because you're afraid of what your spiritual sight will show you. So the inner journey can entail fear because we are remembering. It's a process of remembering what we have forgotten about that the truth is. But because we don't remember we think that it's the unknown, and the unknown is fearful. But it's not that it's unknown, it's that we've forgotten the truth. And we just need a little reminding. So I said before that the Holy Spirit cannot see error. It is capable only of looking beyond it to the defense of the atonement. Yes, so the Holy Spirit sees what is reality, and separation is not real. So it's an error, and that's why the Holy Spirit cannot see error, because it's Christ's vision, and it's capable only of looking beyond the error, because it knows the truth. It knows that the error never happened. That's the atonement. So there's no doubt that this may produce discomfort. I mean, yeah, it's not comfortable, because you have to be willing to accept that, like Ken Wapnick says, you have to be willing to accept that you've been wrong about everything. Okay. And that can be uncomfortable, especially because we want to be right, and we're not. So it's a very humbling experience to realize I have been wrong about everything. And so, but the discomfort is not the final outcome of the perception. When the Holy Spirit is permitted to look upon the defilement of the altar, he also looks immediately towards the atonement. Okay, so when we look within, you can think of that as the altar within, which is the mind. And the idea of error is an idea that often comes with guilt, okay, and sin. So when you think about, I was really mean to that person, I was angry and whatever, and then you really look at how that was an error. You don't necessarily feel good about that, so you can feel very dirty inside. You can feel very ashamed. You can feel, really embarrassed. So there's a lot of stuff in there that can feel like we have defiled the altar, like we're not pure, like we're not innocent anymore. But when the Holy Spirit looks at that, he's not looking at it to judge. He's just looking at it immediately to correct it, to say, wait a minute. You can't be guilty because the separation never happened. And all of your miscreations, they're not real. And so, and therefore nothing that the Holy Spirit perceives can induce fear, because the Holy Spirit is not judging. When it's looking, it's not judging to condemn. It's looking, and unfortunately, I think we confuse correction with condemnation. I think we've learned to associate, if I did something wrong, I must be guilty, and I need punishment, so I can learn not to do it again. So that's why it can be fearful to look with the Holy Spirit, because we have all these associations, maybe from growing up, where parents punished us when we did something wrong. But the looking with the Holy Spirit is simply it's looking with love to correct the error of a perception that we somehow changed ourselves and are no longer the way that God created us, innocent and pure and loving. So so everything that results from spiritual awareness is merely channelized towards correction. Yeah, and it's correction that is loving. So there's no judgment, there's no punishment. Discomfort is aroused only to bring the need for correction into awareness. So that's how we know that when we feel discomfort of any kind, even a small little bit, that's how we know that there's something there that needs healing. That we are holding, we're still believing something that is not true. And we can ask the Holy Spirit to look at that with us so that it can be corrected and healed. So discomfort is not necessarily a bad thing. We can use it. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just, it brings our attention to what needs healing.
It's like a signpost, basically.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. And of course, you know, in the world, we believe in levels. So that discomfort could be, you know, pain, could be, you know, pretty strong, pretty intense, or it can be just sort of a very slight discomfort. But either way, there's fear there. Okay, Sonia?
The fear of healing arises in the end from an unwillingness to accept unequivocally that healing is necessary. What the physical eye sees is not corrective, nor can error be corrected by any device that can be seen physically. As long as you believe in what your physical sight tells you, your attempts at correction will be misdirected. The real vision is obscured because you cannot endure to see your own defiled altar. But since the altar has been defiled, your state becomes doubly dangerous unless it is perceived.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, so this whole section started with the fear of release, and so here it says the fear of healing, which is the same thing. The fear of release arises in the end from an unwillingness to accept unequivocally that healing is necessary. Because we're not willing to look at the error. So we're denying the error. Okay, we're saying yeah, we can't heal if we deny that we need healing. Okay, so the error cannot be corrected if we deny that there's an error. And so maybe a part of us can see that, yeah, maybe we need healing, but there's another part that doesn't want to look at the error. Okay, and so there's going to be fear of healing because we're not ready to look at the error inwardly. And we're still using the physical eyes to see. So we're still trying to project the error outside of us. We're not willing to take back the projection and to forgive and stop blaming an external agent, an external person, or, you know, whoever we want to believe is to blame. So what the physical eye sees is not corrective, nor can error be corrected by any device that can be seen physically. Because that's a belief in magic. So as long as you believe in what your physical sight tells you, your attempt at correction will be misdirected. So if we believe what our physical sight tells us, we are not being guided by the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit sees with inward vision. And that's just a way to, and that's just the fear of healing. Okay, because we're not ready to look inside and to look at the defiled altar. And that's why the real vision is obscured, because you cannot endure to see your own defiled altar. And we have to be willing to look at those really hidden emotions and ideas. Most of them are, like guilt, shame, frustration, feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, those things that we just don't want to admit, feelings of inferiority, feelings of things that we would rather try to compensate for and make an image to try to hide so that others can see this other side of us, but not see what we think we are. And we can't heal that way. We have to be able to look at what we've done, what we've made, what we have accepted and believed in to be true that is not true, in order for that to be released. Otherwise, we're going to be afraid of what's in there. But since the altar has been defiled, your state becomes doubly dangerous unless it is perceived. Yes, because we've defiled it. We're repressing, and we're feeling that shame or embarrassment or feelings of inferiority or whatever. And then to deny those is just doubly dangerous, because it's like putting an extra lock on the fear of release. And it's just like adding another layer to the fear of releasing the fear, so that, we're blocking the healing. Okay. Okay, Teresa, number 9.
Healing is an inability, excuse me, healing is an ability that developed after the separation, before which it was unnecessary. Like all aspects of the belief in space and time, it is temporary. However, as long as time persists, healing is needed as a means of protection. This is because healing rests on charity, and charity is a way of perceiving the perfection of another, even if you cannot perceive it in yourself. Most of the loftier concepts of which you are capable now are time dependent. Charity is really a weaker reflection of a much more powerful love encompassment that is far beyond any form of charity you can conceive of as yet. Charity is essential to right-mindedness in the limited sense in which it can now be attained.
Okay, so I mean, the first sentence is clear, right? I mean, we wouldn't need healing if we didn't believe that we were separate, because that's what we're healing, is we're healing the belief in separation. So healing is part of the belief in space and time, because space and time is the belief that we are separate ego bodies that live in space and time, which is a physical time-bound existence that is temporary. But as long as we hold on to time, the belief in time, then healing is needed as a means of protection from fear, because otherwise we're going to be in a state of fear, nonstop. And this is because healing rests on charity. And charity is a way of perceiving the perfection of another, even if you cannot perceive it in yourself. And so it's not, let's see, to see someone in fear. I know when I watch my grandkids and stuff, it's not something that I would want for them. I mean, I don't want to be in fear, but but we have made fear into something that can be fun. Okay. So, my 4-year-old will say, "Oh, well, grandma, play the skeleton music, from Halloween." Okay. And so these are supposed to be scary little skeletons, dead skeletons, but that's has all these associations of having fun and, going out with, to get candy and sweetness and all of that stuff. So, um, so, let's see, where was I going with that? So healing is needed as a means of protection. And but it's not always recognized that way. So that's why that's why I was saying is that sometimes trying to release fear is not something that the receiver is ready for, because they have all these associations of fun, of good times. It's the past, and we want to hold on to the past. So it feels like, oh, well, if I let go of the fear, I'm going to be miserable, because I'm going to lose all these feelings of having a good time. um, uh, but but if we really look at it, and we recognize that it comes with both, that the terror of the fear is also there. And so no one wants to be in terror. No one wants to see anyone in terror. And so um, the idea of charity is the idea of, of wanting the very best for you, of wanting not for you not to suffer. And so if I can recognize that the end of suffering is in recognizing my true perfection, or your true perfection, I'm going to want to be, I'm going to want to give that to you, because I'm going to want to receive that too. And so even if I cannot perceive that perfection in myself, I can see it in you. In fact, sometimes we can see people as perfect, but we see ourselves as really imperfect. So we have a really hard time being kind to ourselves, but we can be really kind to others. And so we can offer charity as a way of perceiving that perfection in the other, even if we're not so charitable with ourselves. But charity is a lofty concept, and they're all time dependent. And all it's saying is that there is something even more powerful, love encompassing, and far beyond any form of charity that we can conceive of. But we can start with charity. It is part of right-mindedness in a limited sense. And that's where we can start. So we can desire the very best for people, rather than, I can remember when I would be jealous of people growing up, because we grew up in a quote unquote low economic household. But I remember a feeling, less than for that. And so I remember feeling jealous, when people were successful and were making a lot of money or something like that. And then some, and then I realized that that I could be happy for them. And that I would be sharing in that happiness that they were experiencing. Like, if if someone was sharing on Facebook, oh, I'm really excited. I just got this wonderful job, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, I am so happy for you, and you sound happy. Well, I'm happy for you. And and I really mean that. And to really mean that is, it's almost like I'm sharing in their happiness. And so there's no separation there. Because because good things happen to everyone. You see, I'm not coming from a place of scarcity where oh, you're so special because um, you made your dreams come true. And I haven't done that. So that's a place of scarcity, but that doesn't feel good, And certainly I'm not going to be happy, that's for sure. I'm going to be unhappy. Uh, so so yeah, to express charity, I think, is to recognize that my wanting you to live happily and to and to just have the best experience you can is also going to make me happy. So and it's limited to the space and time, because it's about the things in space and time. Okay, well, that career may only last you for 2 years. Okay, and then you may decide it was a terrible idea or whatever, but for the little time it lasted, I'm happy that you're happy. uh, yeah, so okay, last paragraph, so we can stop here. Let's see, I don't remember who read. Is it my turn? Whose turn is it?
I forgot.
Okay, I'll
I
just,
don't mind reading. I'll read.
okay.
Charity is a way of looking at another as if he had already gone far beyond his actual accomplishments in time. Since his own thinking is faulty, he cannot see the atonement for himself, or he would have no need of charity. The charity that is accorded him is both an acknowledgement that he needs help and a recognition that he will accept it. Both of these perceptions clearly imply their dependence on time, making it apparent that charity still lies within the limitations of this world. I said before that only revelation transcends time. The miracle, as an expression of charity, can only shorten it. It must be understood, however, that whenever you offer a miracle to another, you are shortening the suffering for both of you. This corrects retroactively as well as progressively.
Okay. Okay, so charity is a way of looking at another as if he had already gone far beyond his actual accomplishments in time. Okay, so happiness actually is a state. It's a gift that comes from beyond time. And so if you're feeling happy because you just got this job that you really wanted, that's great. Okay, that's an accomplishment in time. But if I can see that that the true source of your happiness is coming from beyond time, okay, and that and that um, and that maybe the job is only going to last you a couple of years, but if I can recognize that 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 2 years of happiness or whatever is a true reflection of what God wills for me and for you, for all of us, then it's going far beyond time, because I'm coming closer to the source of true happiness. And so even if in his own thinking, okay, because it's still faulty because he cannot see the atonement for himself. So even if after 2 years he's like, oh man, yeah, the company went under or whatever, and that was such a good job, um, and so even if he cannot see that he is not separate because he has not accepted the atonement, so even if he cannot see that his happiness is with him 24/7, whether he has that job or he doesn't have that job, that's okay. But that's why he needs charity, because I can see that that the separation never happened, and that oneness that we have with God means that we have that perfect happiness with us all the time. And so the charity is, according to him, is both an acknowledgement that he needs help and a recognition that he will accept it. So our thinking can to recognize that he needs help is to recognize that our thinking is still time bound, because we believe in time. And so we believe that we can lose happiness. We believe that we can lose love. And that's not true. You know, true happiness and true love cannot be lost. And so, but to offer him charity simply means that to offer him the truth that I have received, and also to recognize that he's willing to accept it because he has received it. So when we receive good things in life, like we receive that job that we've always wanted, and we value that, it means that we have accepted that we are worthy of good things, and that we are not deserving of punishment and disappointment and not getting that job. Do you see what I mean? So that he is in a position to accept goodness as a step towards the true recognition of what we are, not separate from it. So both of these perceptions clearly imply their dependence on time, making it apparent that charity still lies within the limitations of the world. And that's fine. That's fine. As long as we're in the world, there's going to be quote unquote change. Okay. But the recognitions that come from the Holy Spirit come from beyond time, where there is no change, and where there is no limitation. And so we can still live in the world, but still recognize that the loss and the gain are not real, that the change itself is part of the illusion of time. And so until we experience revelation that transcends time, charity works great. And the miracle, as an expression of charity, can only shorten time, because it's chipping away at that belief that we are separate and in time, because it's just a belief that's not really true. It must be understood, however, that whenever you offer a miracle to another, you are shortening the suffering of both of you. So that's kind of what I was saying, is that when you're happy for what you have received in your life, and I am happy for you, I am shortening the suffering for both of us, because I get to share in your happiness. So if you're sick and I offer a miracle and there's a healing, it's not just you that's benefiting from the healing. I'm benefiting from that healing too, because it's one ego mind. And for me to see you suffer is suffering for me. And so to release you from suffering is to release myself from that suffering. And this corrects retroactively as well as progressively. So what it's saying is, because the miracle comes from outside of time, the suffering is a correction, so that we don't have to keep repeating the error, and we don't have to keep suffering in the future, and it, because it's correcting the past, which is where the suffering is stuck. So it's the healing of the past, because we're holding on to the grievance, we're holding on to the unforgiveness, and that's the sickness, that's the denial of the truth of what we are, and that's very painful to not know that we are deserving of love, of happiness, of all the good things in the world that can come to us, because we will what's the word? We will miscreate to prove ourselves right, so that we continue to suffer. So it's a correction that that heals in the present moment, but it heals the past, and therefore it heals the future, retroactively and progressively. Okay. Okay, so that was a kind of a long section, but I think it was worth it. So, okay, so anything before we stop? Nope. Okay, so thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next time. We're going to go to the part, it's section A under section 5, which is special principles of miracle workers. Okay, so we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Perfect.
Bye.
Bye.